this one verse from the Bible that says, if you're confused, go to the leader of your day and don't diverge left from right. Meaning, if he says left, it's left. If he says left is right, then you go right. And if he says right is left, then you go left. Okay? And you have to do that. As an aside, there's a great story about one of the rabbis whose wife hated him. There's a whole genre of stories of rabbis who had wives that they did not get along with. And every time he asked for peas, she gave him rice. And every time, or beans, and every time she asked for beans, she gave him peas. Like, he would always give the wrong thing. And his son kind of figured this out. So he figured, aha, yeah. His father would ask for beans. I'd say, oh, mother, father wants peas. She would make beans. And he suddenly started getting what he wants. He says, aha, it appears that your mother has improved. And the son says, well, actually, this is what's been going. He said, the father says, thank you for your kind intentions, but you really shouldn't do that. One should be honest. So maybe he just likes suffering.
That why they have rice and beans together?
Or he didn't want to think better of his wife unnecessarily.
That's really funny too. Don't want to waste a good thought on her.
So if two rabbis disagree,
Mhm.
you go with the rabbi whose decision you like best.
Let's find out. So let's talk about, first of all, rabbis inventing law. Okay. So this is from Shabbat 23, A. And who wants to read for a little bit?
I'll read, and thanks for the good big type.
You're welcome. Okay.
Rabbi Barashi said that Rob said, one who lights a Hanukkah light must recite a blessing. And Rabbi Yirmiyah said, one who sees a burning Hanukkah light must recite a blessing, because the mitzvah is not only to kindle the light, but to see the light as well. Therefore, there is room to recite a blessing even when seeing them.
Good. Okay, so very simple. You light Hanukkah candles, they need blessings. Great. Keep going.
Rabbi Yehuda therefore said, on the first day of Hanukkah, the one who sees burning lights recites 2 blessings, and the one who lights recites 3 blessings. From there on, from the second day of Hanukkah, the one who lights recites 2 blessings, and the one who sees recites 1 blessing.
Okay, so the 2 blessings, well, actually, he'll explain.
The Gemara asks, what blessing does he omit on the other days? The Gemara answers, he omits the blessing of time, who has given us life, sustained us, and brought us to this time.
So Shehachiyanu, Kimanu, Vihiyanu, Lasmanazeh, first day only. Okay, good.
The Gemara asks, and let us omit the blessing of the miracle. Who has performed miracles? The Gemara answers, the miracle is relevant on all of the days, whereas the blessing, who has given us life, is only pertinent to the first time he performs the mitzvah each year.
Okay, so now we're going to have the interesting question. The person who lights the candles is going to say, "You command us to light and gave us miracles." And the other person's just going to say, "He gave us miracles," right? So the question is, where's this commandment to light candles come from?
And what blessing does one recite? He recites, who has made us holy through his commandments and has commanded us to light the Hanukkah light. The Gemara asks, and where did he command us?
Aha, because here's the bracha. Asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu ladlik ner shel Hanukkah. Commanded us to light the lights of Hanukkah. Problem. Where's the commandment for Hanukkah lights if, as we all should remember, Hanukkah happens after the Bible closes? So it can't be a mitzvah from the Torah to light Hanukkah lights if Hanukkah isn't in the Torah, right? That's, you'll agree that's a problem, right?
So when is this taking place,
This discussion? So this discussion's in the Gemara. I can look at which generation these rabbis are.
It's just approximately.
Like between the year 100 and 600.
Right.
It's a long time after Hanukkah, and it's a long time after the Bible, right? But they're making this question: how can you have mitzvot? How can you say God commanded us to do this? If you say that, you got to show me the command. Where does it say that?
It must be a general commandment.
Okay, could be. We'll see how they get themselves out of this hole. Okay.
The Gemara asks, and where did he command us? The mitzvah of Hanukkah is not mentioned in the Torah, so how is it possible to say that it was commanded to us by God? The Gemara answers that Rabbi Aviat said, the obligation to recite this blessing is derived from the verse, you shall not turn aside from the sentence which they shall declare unto you to the right nor to the left.
Aha, that's our verse. Where's the commandment to light Shabbos lights? From the commandment of listen to the sage when he tells you what to do. Okay, just think on that a moment. How great is that? Anything that the sages command that's not in the Bible is in the Bible under listen to the sages and do what they do. Okay? Is there any room for abuse here? Or overreach?
Well, I mean, it's just the whole thing should be overreach. I mean, this is in Deuteronomy, and it says, you shall not turn aside from the sentence which they shall declare unto you, but where does it say that they are the sages?
Because it says, you go to the magistrate in your time. Clearly the sages are magistrates, and just look at them, they're having courts. Okay, people only have as much authority as you give them, okay? People are voluntarily buying into the system of having the rabbis in charge by virtue of the fact that they haven't overthrown them yet, okay? That's how it works, right? The government of the United States has authority over us because we haven't overthrown it yet. If we overthrow the government, then they no longer have authority. On the other hand, if we're unsuccessful in overthrowing that government, oh boy, are we in trouble.
But in places in the Gemara where they're arguing and somebody uses the argument, you can't go there because our constituency will not accept it, will
Yes.
overthrow it.
Yes, there are examples of that. The principle's called huk hazi. Go and look outside, right? You are not allowed to issue a decree that the congregation will not follow, because it will end up making you look foolish, and we don't want to cause the rabbinate to fall into disrepute. So if there is a decree that people just aren't going to follow, lean back on it. You want to know the example? Women have to go to the mikveh every month. Okay, we still do that. Men have to go to the mikveh after every seminal emission. I don't see that happening. I do not see a line at the mikveh every morning or, okay? But it's in the Bible. It's at the same level. The answer is people just weren't going to do that. It just was not going to happen. So it's like, okay, we won't enforce that.
So
But
currently in Israel, where there's a big difference in the population between their acceptance of some of the laws there.
even in the Orthodox community, men don't go to the mikveh every morning. But there are some Hasidic communities where they do. But that's the minor. Okay. And then there's other examples of laws that they have. It's like they're not going to follow that.
So that adds for a lot of variation in the observance of Jewish law.
Well, not a lot, because it's usually they're making decisions for a community. Each community does its own thing. And when in Talmudic times there was a central community in Iraq which was able to communicate with the force of the government, there was pretty much kind of uniform-ish observance throughout the Jewish world, at least through the Jewish world living under Muslim control. Once the Islamic State, if you will, fell, and Christians started going in and things got more isolated, then local communities would come up with local customs. So Sephardic Jews do it one way, Ashkenazi Jews do it another way. Jews in Rome do it a different way, Jews in Greece do it a different way, Jews in Slavonic do it a different way, Jews in, and then it starts, branching out. So local communities would have their own local customs, and then, which was sometimes come into conflict with each other. The greatest example of seeing where these are coming into conflict with each other is if you look at the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch was being written by Yosef Karo in Israel, and Jerusalem, and he's writing, this is the way we do it. And Moshe Isserles is writing in Germany. He says, yeah, this is how we do it in our lands. On every single item, there's by the way, this is how we do it here. And then in modern days, we're beginning to become more uniform because of the printing press. Now everybody follows what our scroll says. We used to be. Now there's other publishers. And also people feel permission to do what they want because they don't need to go to the sages. They're all their own sage.
So does Reform Judaism use this idea that you follow the custom of, the Rabbi said, to, let's say that you no longer have to keep kosher?
No. Reform is stepping outside of the system completely. Okay? On paper, what Reform says is follow the ethical guidance. All of the kitchen laws, if they bring you joy, sure, you can do it, but you don't have to. Each individual is their own rabbi, which is interesting because in the synagogue prayer environment, there may be less tolerance for people doing their own thing, because you see, with me, I've got like all the halakha to back myself up on. So, if you're disagreeing with me, you're disagreeing with all this. But the Reform rabbi only has their own themselves, because they don't have that backing them up anymore. So if they make a decision and they say, this is what we're going to do, and you challenge it, you're challenging the rabbi. Me, you're not challenging me, you're challenging the tradition. So I don't think the Reform rabbis rely on that because they don't buy into the system at all. It's not a halachic system. Right? There is no commandment within Reform Judaism in the sense of a commandment. Mitzvah is something you must do. Mitzvah becomes a good deed, something that you should do. But the Reform rabbin is not going to say, okay, guys, guess what? We were wrong about kosher, you got to do it now. They're not going to do that. But they might say, there is some value as a spiritual practice in kosher. Is that sort of answer?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So back to like the Gemara, is the format of it is questioning and arguing. Rabbis arguing with each other. And then ultimately, sometimes they come to a decision and sometimes they don't.
Yeah, quite often.
Doesn't that sort of lead the congregation to fight a decision? It's almost like structurally you're making it difficult to accept.
Okay.
You get the board for that.
I got the board.
You got the board out. See what you did? Okay. We've got the written Torah. Okay, that's the Bible. And we've got the oral Torah. That is the Mishnah. And then that's later the Talmud and the Gemara. And all those other things. And yeah, this is a recording of discussions. And it gets finalized between 600 and 800, okay? In the next millennium after that, people get a little fed up. And they say, this needs to be organized, right? So Maimonides, the Rambam, organizes his Mishnah Torah. Alfasi, the Rif, Isaac, we should call him, organizes his version of the Talmud, which is the Rif, where he goes through the Talmud and he gets rid of all of the stories and he says, and here's the rule, here's the rule, here's the rule, right? And then you have one other, and here, I think, is probably you have the Rosh, or it could be the Mordechai, I'm not sure, but he also comes up with some kind of a code. And what happens is you have a fellow called the Arbaturim. And the Arbaturim, the Baal HaTorah, is the guy who wrote that. And he says, you know, I'm gonna look at these three here. And whatever the majority, wherever there's a disagreement, I'll go with the majority. And I'll organize that into 4 general categories, and I'm gonna call that the tour. The tour is very nice. Yosef Karo writes a commentary on the tour of the Beit Yosef. And he explains things for the community, kind of brings it all together. Moshe Isserles writes a commentary on that combination called the I forget. It's something that it's something Moshe. Anyways, Yosef Karo is saying this is how it is in Sepharad, and Isserles is saying this is the way it is in Ashkenaz. Yosef Karo says, you know, this is kind of long work. I'm going to synthesize it and just do the head points. I'm going to take away the arguments and just put this is the basic arguments, right? The basic rules. And he calls that his Shulchan Aruch. The set table. Moshe Isserles says, wow, that's pretty good. I'm going to comment on that too. And that's going to be the Ramah. Every edition of the Shulchan Aruch is published with both of those together. The Shulchan Aruch is organized into 4 broad categories, and each of those are divided into subcategories, and it's kind of organized. This is where you look to find out what Jewish law is. If you look at this and you say, I wonder where that came from, there'll be little comments in the margin that say, oh, by the way, that comes from here, or there, or there. But Jews, at least from the, I'm lousy on dates, but the 15th, 16th century, somewhere around there, right? This is the standard code of law. And then, of course, there's commentaries on all these things. So nobody's looking at the Talmud. You can't paskin by the Talmud. You can't tell Jewish, no, everyone's going to here. This is a standard code. This has been like the standard. In the American example, it's the I didn't study American. It's the unified code, right? It's the the basic legal system. So this is where all the laws are spelled out. And if you ask me, Rabbi, what is the law on X? This is where I'm going to go. If I want to explain it, I'll look at all that. That's very interesting. But this kind of makes things unified. This for the Sephardic community, this for the Ashkenazic community, and to the extent that other communities have things that they want to say, they're commenting on this. So for the conservative movement, they're going to have tshuvot, they're going to have books, but they're always going to quote their sources. And the tshuvot of the conservative movement, like, the tshuva that says you can drive on Shabbat or whatever, is going to say, for example, OH or Chaim, which is one of those four, and it's going to tell you which paragraph number it's riffing on.
No, I was just scratching.
Okay.
So is there a contemporary version that has the more modern vote and that is there
So the people will publish restatements of the law, but they're always going to say they're going to point you in these directions. The Mishnah Torah is well organized. People like studying it, and it gives you pretty much. But this is pretty much up to date. Okay, nothing has changed in how we observe Hanukkah since nothing is really innovated. And sure, there'll be collections of tshuvot and things, and there might be, here's a guide to Jewish life, and you can restate it, but it's just pulling on this. This is like the text that everyone goes back to. Yeah, this is the funnel.
So, depending on how you interpret that, Jewish law can change even today, depending on how you interpret it.
Yes, Jewish law is capable of gentle evolution in the same way that any system that is interpreted by judges can be interpreted, right? And so they can be changed, it can be reinterpreted, but this is what it's basing off of. But they're not creating new legislation, right? So the rabbis are like the court system, right? They're interpreting and they're telling you concepts that you can work on, but they're not legislating, okay? This is more like legislation. This is apodictic law. This is what it is.
So the legislation kind of stopped up on the discussions and then everything else is interpretation.
Ideas come in and move around. So things like electricity, right? There's sort of a consensus of opinions, but what they're doing with electricity is they're fitting it into a prior existing category and saying, well, these laws must apply. Okay. In the same way that when you come to, of course, with the Supreme Court or wherever, they're going to say, well, what is this most similar to? Right? They very rarely say, I'm going to invent an entirely new concept. Okay. Sometimes they'll invent it like negligence in England was an entirely new concept out of nowhere. Okay. The right to privacy in American context is a new right out of nowhere. They just invented it, okay? But this right of privacy is used to interpret legislation and to say this legislation is unconstitutional, but you can't actually write new privacy-based legislation. Like there's no, the right to privacy can't tell you what you're allowed to do. It just can tell you what you can't do or what you can't legislate against. Yeah.
So in the Supreme Court, there are basically two divisions. Those who say we'll interpret it as the founders saw it, and those people who say you can't do that because these things came about long after the founders wouldn't even have envisioned it. So is there the same idea in interpretation?
There was a school of thought in there actually maybe kind of look at it. There's this notion that in Chadash, that there's nothing new in the Torah, right? So there are schools that say you can't legislate anything new, and there's no such thing as new things. And then there's people who say, no, of course we need to adapt and evolve, right? And the biggest example of that was, kitniot, okay? Kitniot. So one rabbi says, kitniot the Chaye Adam is the name of the writer, The Life of Man. And he writes and he says, kitniot, he says, tipuch adama, potatoes are a kind of kitniot.
Excuse me, but what's kidney?
Kitniot are the things that the rabbis won't allow you to eat on Pesach
Oh,
because-
okay. Now I
because
remember.
they think that you're stupid. I'm sorry. Because they're unhappy. Okay.
Well, the
So,
Orthodox,
the kidney,
everyone else.
yeah. So, and us too, I mean,
Yeah.
so, I mean, nowhere does it say anything about rice and beans and all those things. It's just,
Oh,
basically, look,
you just
the-
reminded me
it
that
just
I didn't
says,
know.
it is wheat, barley, spelt, rye, and oats. And they're not really sure what oats are. And all the other stuff that we're not eating is our own nourishkeit. Okay? One of the other rabbis says, you know something, you're going too far. I think you're a kitniyot, and potatoes are the apples of life. Okay, so are the life of man. So yeah, it's an evolving system, and there are restatements of the law out there, but nobody's putting in new legislation because it's kind of settled. We kind of know what Shabbat is, and okay, so cars were a new innovation, but come on, that's fire. It's got to be fire. I don't understand what you're saying. It's not fire.
What about AI? Is that going to change anything?
How would it?
Well, I'm not sure the potential of AI, but is there anything about making decisions or making images that are not necessarily true?
No, we allow art, and we allow writing.
No, images that aren't true.
What do you mean images that aren't true?
Well, they're talking about in AI, the ability to take someone's image and something they've said and reworking it to something that they didn't say, making it look like they said it.
Deepfakes.
What is it called?
Deepfakes.
Deep fakes, yes.
Yeah, that's not really AI, but I mean, it could be used if you don't do it.
Okay, AI is a tool, right? But the concept of genivat da'at, misleading people, is already there. You're not allowed to mislead people. Okay? Whether you're misleading them because you've produced documentary proof that looks like the President of the United States is dealing drugs, or whether it's you're walking into a store where you have no intention of buying and say, hey, how much is that? Either attempt, you are misleading people, and it's wrong. Now, I think I think we have run out of concepts that are entirely new and unprecedented. We've just had technological advancements, right? AI is just an innovation of writing.
The original idea.
There's no original ideas now. Okay.
Just as an aside.
Yeah.
From an adult ed point of view, it would be really fascinating to take some law and just trace it through that whole system that you just
Oh,
showed
sure.
us. And
Sure.
one thing to see how it evolved and how it is that we got here today.
We can do that. We can do that. It's like, how do we get to driving on Shabbat? That's a fascinating one. That is a fascinating one. Yeah.
I can think of a system which presents a whole new problems. For instance, space travel.
Uh-huh.
When is Shabbat? What are you
so
allowed to
they,
do?
yeah, but they already have that because if you go far enough north, there's only 2 days a year. There's only 1 day a year at the North Pole, right? It's either daylight for 6 months or it's darkness for 6 months. Okay, not 6 months, but it's like you have places where days the day doesn't end, and or Shabbat is like 3 hours long. And they already have a solution for that. And it's like where time no longer makes sense, you are arbitrary and you pick a place and that's where you go. So Shabbat times in the Arctic are set by London or whatever place you pick. And okay, that's what we'll observe. So in space, it's the same thing, right? Whatever Shabbat is, well, first of all, when you're in space, I don't know this, but I'm gonna guess that the astronauts are regulated on some relation to the universal time clock and the universal time zones, and they just work in, shifts of arbitrary day and arbitrary night and arbitrary day of the week, because it interfaces. And although they may be in space and going around the planet in the sense that, as far as their lived life in the spaceship, they're on the same 7-day week of 24-hour days that we are. It's just there's local time, and then there's, I'm guessing probably it's Houston time year round in the space station. I'm gonna guess, right? Thanks. So there are, they're always going to look to the past to try to find a solution. There's but we're very good at that. Okay, so lighting the candles. Okay, should not turn aside from the right to the left. Okay. So that was Rav Avia, okay? Milton, why don't you tell us what Rav Nehemiah says?
Okay, therefore, one who fulfills their directives fulfills a divine commandment. Rav Nehemiah said that the mitzvah to heed the voice of the elders of Israel is derived from the verse, ask your father, and he will declare unto you your elders, and they will tell you.
So no, it's from a different verse. It's called, whatever your father tells you, that's what you do, right? Listen to the voice of tradition, right?
Wait a minute. So you listen to your father as opposed to a sage, or?
No. What the sages are saying, what he's saying is that the sages get their authority from ask your father,
Right.
and he will declare unto you your elders, and they will tell you. The elders,
The elders or
Yeah,
the sages?
the sages.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Just-
don't ask your father anything, go right to
I
the
mean, you
sages.
can ask your father, but it's basically this notion of, just do what the do what the academy tells you.
Mhm.
Okay.
Right.
Which is a great innovative system, because the academy can make things up, and they say, look, I have it on the tradition. Next week we'll talk about places where people try to get into disputes about tradition and things, right? Because it's my memory versus your memory, right? Okay, so read us a little bit of my 22a.
Mishnah, with how many lashes does one flog a person sentenced to receive lashes? One flogs him with 40 lashes, less one, as it is stated, and he shall strike him before him in accordance with his wickedness by number. 40 he shall strike him, he shall not add.
Okay, so the Bible says if you're going to whip someone, you whip them 40 times, don't add any. Okay?
But it says less one. What's the less one?
That's what we need to figure out. Basically, Milt, you've got it. The question is, if the Bible says strike them 40 times and not more,
Yeah.
where are the rabbis coming away with 39?
In case you make a mistake, I guess, and
Well,
you miscount the lashes.
maybe. So here we go.
Okay. 40 he shall strike him, he shall not add. The Mishnah joins the end of the first verse and the beginning of the second, forming the phrase by number 40, which is interpreted as a sum adjacent to 40. Rabbi Yehuda says he is flogged with full 40 lashes, and where he is flogged, the extra lash. As the Mishnah proceeds to explain, the 39 lashes are divided into 3 and administered in 3 places on the body of the person being flogged. According to Rabbi Yehuda, there is 1 lash that remains. That lash is administered between the shoulders.
Okay.
I thought we didn't do lashes. I thought we just did stoning.
Oh, no, we do lashes. We absolutely do lashes. In fact, even when we gave up on stoning people to death, we still did lashes. Keep going. So this is a continuation. Yeah?
Okay. And then they assessed him again and concluded that he cannot receive 40 lashes and survive. He is exempt from the additional lashes. if the doctors initially assessed concerning him that he is able to receive only 18 lashes, and once he was flogged 18 times, they assessed that he is able to receive 40, he is exempt from receiving additional lashes.
Okay, so the concept here is, by 40 we mean around 40. By around 40 we mean, let's assess how much this person's able to take, and we'll pick that number and we'll do that number so long as it's not number 40. And if at the end it turns out we were wrong, he could really take more, it's too late, we already made the assessment, you can't add more, right? That's you know, God
That's
forbid,
double
God forbid
calculating.
you should be punished for being more robust, yeah.
Today, we wouldn't, in our society, we wouldn't lash somebody as punishment.
Sure we would.
It's cruel and unusual.
And
Sure we would.
no, not
Our current law does not allow it.
as a legal thing, but, so I think this reflects the involvement of society. And when the rabbis interpreted it, they interpreted it based on the society that they lived in.
Well, the Bible says you're allowed to lash people. And they were lashing people up until last century in the entire world, right? The whole notion of you shouldn't hurt people physically is really just a European one, and really just a recent European one, right?
But still, it involves the change of society's viewpoint.
Sure.
And so, if that's the case, then what about when the rabbis were originally interpreting these things? And they were, of course, trapped in the society and the
Mhm,
society's viewpoint that society had. So as societies evolve, it seems to me that there should be an evolution in interpretation.
Yes, it's true that interpretation always evolves, but the original text that they're interpreting doesn't, right? So, for example, with capital punishment, the Bible provides for capital punishment. The rabbis got around it by saying, yes, we can do capital punishment, but we're going to make the procedure to actually be able to execute someone so onerous and impossible that it'll never happen. Same thing with lashes. We can still lash people. It's just getting to the point of being able to lash them is hard to get to, right? But this whole notion of not being able to hurt people, that's really recent. That is really, really recent, right? Now, you know, instead of, I mean, which would you rather have? 10 lashes or 5 years of incarceration?
Depends who's doing the lashing.
I might take the lashes because once it's done, I'm free to go, right? That there's something to be said for a system that, you know, is like not long and drawn out, right? I'm making a facetious, you know, argument. I don't believe we should be lashing anyone, right? Now we punish people with money, but if someone has no money, it doesn't matter how big a fine you give them, right? And stealing time from them is like, you know something, I'm very upset with you, and so guess what? I'm going to provide you with room and board and, you know, activity for the next 10 years. That's how unhappy I am with you. You're going to stay at this hotel. You know, it's not the best hotel, but you know, you can never leave. But hey, all meals included, all inclusive, clothing. You know, that's punishment.
Well, your freedom is taken away, that's the punishment.
Yeah, but here's the thing.
Now they have people go home.
When you talk about freedom, look at the free person that they might otherwise be. Working 3 jobs, 18 hours, 20 hours a day, 18 hours a day, just to be able to barely survive. That's freedom.
But if you listen to people who have been incarcerated for even
Uh-huh.
for relatively
Uh-huh.
short periods of time in wonderful places,
Yep.
they'll tell you that the loss of that freedom
Yep.
is something important.
Yes, and that's why it's effective. I'm just saying that in terms of, an efficient use of resources for society, it would be less expensive just to hit people. Just saying that.
So is 40 the maximum lashes anybody can receive?
Correct.
For
In
a
Jewish
crime.
law, yes.
But you can receive less. If it's a
Yes.
lesser crime, you can receive lesser lashes.
So so far it seems to be that it's 40 lashes, and the rabbi is saying that's around 40, and maybe it's gonna be less. Okay, keep going.
But
Okay.
for the
What?
lashes, was it public? Was there a humiliation factor
I'm not sure.
involved too?
I'd have to look up on
Did
that.
they do it in public, you mean?
Yeah.
Like,
I don't know,
obviously,
I don't know.
humiliation.
I don't know if humiliation is part of it or not. I have not. I will be 100% upfront. I have not done great research into lashing in rabbinic times. Yeah, I haven't made a great study of exactly how we lashed
It
people.
seems that humiliation is not a Jewish thing.
Humiliation is not a Jewish thing. In fact, in this week's parsha, we learn from Judah, we learn from Tamar, right? Tamar has the opportunity to embarrass Judah, right? Because Judah and Tamar, you've got, we're gonna do this page next week too. Okay, you've got Judah. Judah marries a woman who's the daughter of Shua. No, but we don't know we don't know her name. Okay, Judah gets married to a woman, and he has 3 children with her. Onan, and Shua. Judah finds a wife for Er. Her name is Tamar. Er does something that's displeasing to the Lord, we're not sure what, and is killed. Levirate marriage, Tamar gets married to Onan. Onan is pissed off. Onan knows that according to the law of levirate marriage, his first child with Tamar is going to be counted as Er's child. And only his second child with Tamar will be counted as his own child. And that upsets him. So he purposely spills his seed, prevents conception. So God kills him too. Tamar is supposed to be married to Shua. Judah's a little worried. Judah says, I don't know about this. Says, Tamar, you go and you hang out in your father's house, and I'll wait. And when Shua's old enough, you'll get married, right? Well, she waits. She waits and she waits and she waits. And she's not being summoned to get married to Shua. Meanwhile, Judah's wife dies. Judah decides that he's going to go to Timnah to go sheep shearing. Timnah's a place. Tamar hears about this, and she says, aha, I will go wait along the road at Enaim. And when Judah encounters Tamar at Enaim, she's dressed up like a temple prostitute. She's wearing a veil. And Judah says, how much? All right. And Judah and Tamar have a transaction. At the end of it, Judah says, okay, I'm gonna pay you, I'll pay you a kid. I don't have money now. So she says, okay, give me some collateral. Give me a pledge. Give me your signet and your staff and your coat. Okay. He goes off, talks to his friend Hiram. Hiram, go take a sheep. Hiram goes here, and guess what? Tamar is not there. Tamar has gone back to her father's house. Hiram says, you know, if we keep asking for this temple prostitute, we're gonna look like an idiot. So look, I tried to pay her and let her keep the stuff. Well, 3 months passed, and Tamar looks like she's pregnant, which is a problem because Tamar has been living as a widow in her father's household. And so they report to Judah, they say, your daughter's been playing the harlot. We don't know with who, but okay. So he says, let her be taken out to be burned, right? Put to death. She sends a message. In the message, she says, the owner of these 3 items, that's who I'm pregnant by. Judah at this point has a choice. He can say, he can look left, he can look right. Nobody else saw the delivery of the objects. He can just be quiet, let her be burnt, and that's fine. No one will ever know what he did because she communicates it privately.
But he wants those 3 things back, right?
He's already got them back. She sent them a message. She said, hey, and he said, okay, that's very nice. But no, Judah says, she is more righteous than I because I withheld Shua from her and I was an appropriate person for a left-right marriage and therefore she did what was correct. And so he's never intimate with her again, although some interpreters say that he was married to her afterwards. Anyways, she has 2 children, Peretz and Peretz's brother, whose name I never remember, and Peretz becomes the ancestor of King David. Okay? Now, because Tamar did not do this publicly and throw Judah under the bus, the rabbis learned it is better to allow yourself to be thrown into a fiery furnace than embarrass someone else in public. So yes, we don't like to embarrass people.
And where is this story? In the Mishnah or what? Where is it in the Torah? This is in the Torah?
Okay. Milt?
Yeah.
You're gonna come to Shul this Saturday.
Uh-huh.
And they're gonna read chapter 38 of Genesis. And that's the only thing we're reading this week, because before 38 is selling Joseph into the pit. And after 38 is Joseph in the house of Potiphar. And then later into prison. But this chapter here in between that story is called Judah Tamar. You never heard about it in Hebrew school because how the hell could they have taught you that in Hebrew school? Okay? But yes, it is in the Bible. The reason you have never heard of it before is because in the Chumash, there's the Hebrew side and the English side. Which side do you read from? Milt?
Mostly English.
Okay, well, then you've missed it.
Hebrew and I read in English.
You've just missed it. So you're gonna hear the story this week, okay?
The test after.
Change the names and write a bestseller on this.
There has.
Well, there are no original ideas to that.
Yeah, but you just change the names and this would be a bestseller.
Oh, sure,
Well,
sure.
Shakespeare
Or a soap opera.
Shakespeare did it.
So, that was just a pure aside. That's just me having fun.
That's it.
Okay. Okay. So, but yes. Okay. Let's try to get through this here. This. Okay. So the Gemara.
Me?
Sure. Why not?
The Gemara begins with a discussion of the number of lashes. What is the reason that the rabbi said that he receives 40 lashes less one? If it had been written 40 by number, I would say that it means 40 as a precise sum. Now that it is written by number 40, the reference is to a sum that approaches 40. Likewise, Rabbi said, how foolish are the rest of the people who stand before a Torah scroll that passes before them, and yet they do not stand before a great man. When a sage passes before them, as in a Torah scroll, 40 is written, and the sages came and subtracted 1, establishing the number of lashes as 39.
Okay, I think he's being facetious here. I think he is. Because he's saying, look, the Torah says 40, and look, but the sages say 40, no, it's 39. If you stand before, you should stand before the sage, because clearly the sages are capable of editing the meaning of the Torah. Apparently, yep.
Yeah, apparently the authority of the sages is so great that they are able to amend an explicit Torah verse.
Okay. We are not going to continue on to the next text because it is long and we are not going to finish it. We'll have to do it next time. That's fine. You all know an example of the authority of the sages to completely change the meaning of the Torah text, right? And you all know it from Yom Kippur. What's the text? The text says, Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim Rav Chesed V'Emet, Noser Chesed La'alafim, Noser Avon V'Fesha, V'Hata'ah, V'Nakeh. Okay, so he gives forgiveness for all of these things, forgives sins, and v'nakeh, and forgives. Period. But if you read the verse in the Bible, v'hata'ah is a enachta, showing a break in the sentence, and the next sentence, v'nakeh lo yinakeh. But nakeh, no, does not connect, does not nakeh, but actually visits punishment upon the third and the fourth generations of those who sin, period. So, forgive? No, God does not forgive. God remembers and punishes the third, the second, the third, the fourth generation, okay? The rabbis took this verse and says, what is God's nature? God's nature is that, and we'll just ignore that verse, right? That's chutzpah.
In other words,
They don't have to.
well, but I mean, people would say, well, I sinned, there's no way back.
Look.
I mean, to a different sect where they say I can assassin.
Yeah, that's in prayers, but you know, the Bible still says, look, if you sin, that sin's on you. But to the extent that you have children, they're influenced by the way you behave. And so they're probably gonna be punished by it too. If you do bad things, your kids get punished as a result. And their kids get punished as a result, and their kids get punished as a result. It is generational punishment, and that's the way the world is. If I put you into prison for all of the years that you should be at home fathering your child, the child is going to suffer because they didn't have a father figure. Then this child's going to suffer because they have a father who never learned how to be a father, right? Maybe by a fourth generation, they'll begin to figure out, oh, these traditions that I have are wrong, maybe I'll improve them. And maybe I'll read a book like, how to raise your children, right? In the same way that I like to say, I was born in 1970. My father raised me with the parenting skills that he experienced as a child in 1929. The parenting skills that his father used in 1929 were skills that his father learned in 1887, maybe? And those parenting skills that he learned was from his father, my great-grandfather, in 1860s. So I like to say that my parenting skills and my child rearing skills are cutting edge 1860s technology. Which would be true, except I read a book and it said, oh, try this instead.
If
Yep.
the fact that it's put from generation to generation, the sin, seems to me to be in contrast to Yom Kippur, when you're supposed to change, and it's assumed that you can change from your quote, sinful ways and become upstanding.
The Bible is authored by God. The Laxor that we use in Yom Kippur, it's authored by the rabbis. It's entirely possible the rabbis are nicer than God. Or that they know better. No, you're right. No, theology, you're right, right? Machzor is all saying that you can make tshuva. You can change. But, just to try to redeem the entire Jewish enterprise here, tshuva is turning. What are you turning away from? You're turning away from the intergenerational problems that the Bible's promising you. So yeah, here's the neat thing, is you can change your fate. You can get out of this intergenerational punishment by making tshuva, by doing things differently, by making a change, absolutely. And the great thing is, this intergenerational thing is enforced by God, not by human beings. Which means if it's not gonna happen, it's not gonna happen. Whereas with human beings, it's a, it doesn't matter. You murdered someone or you did something bad, and now you have, in prison, you've turned yourself into a righteous person. You've gotten yourself a degree, you tutor people, you write letters to help people out, you volunteer, you coach, you're the most amazing person. And meanwhile, this other guy gets into fights and does all sorts of horrible things. But this person was only sentenced to 10 years and you were sentenced to 50. So at the end of 10 years, they go free out into society and you just keep staying because that's human beings. If God was in charge of the system, you'd be out and this person would be in jail forever. Right?
When you say that God wrote the Bible, you mean literally? Or it was my understanding that the Torah has several different styles to it, indicating that it may have been written by several people or several times.
But influenced by God.
Well,
Inspired by God.
well, that's the question.
Okay. Theology.
I think we're off topic.
That's okay. I'll pull it.
Who wrote the Bible? Possibilities. Either God is the author of the Bible, dictating it, or human beings wrote it by themselves. If human beings wrote it by themselves, either they were inspired by God, or they were making it up. Okay? That kind of sums up all the possibilities, right?
Inspired by God or inspired by tradition?
Well, yeah, but tradition's just stuff that somebody made up.
Okay.
Just okay. Okay. Making it up. Let me put that nicer.
As told to. Passed down.
Okay, either it's a human creation or it's a divine creation. Okay. Orthodox Judaism ortho means, anyone here have orthopedics, orthodontics? No.
Bones?
Orthopedics? No.
Your bones? No.
God. Should know this. It says in the book.
Correct. Or straight.
Okay.
Right? Correct. Ortho. Orthopedic, correct your feet. Orthotics, correct your feet, okay? Docs, thought, doxologies. Orthodox have correct belief. So they believe this. Orthodoxy says that we don't complain to be orthodox. We say we're orthoprax. We have correct practice. But belief, we're all over the place. Okay? If it's by God, I would expect certain things. Now I'm being a philosopher, right? From God, I expect a certain perfection. If you look at the Quran, which our friends the Muslims have, they will tell you it is the most perfect text. The Arabic is exquisite. It is wonderful. Our Bible, if you look at it charitably, it's all over the place. There seems to be different styles. There seem to be different strata. And this leads us to believe that maybe there are different hands involved. For example, certain stories get told twice. Doublets. How many times is he saying that his wife is his sister? And the kid had the same story? With the same king? Come on. Or sometimes the story seems like it's like two stories that have been zipped together like a zipper. Like the story of Noah, which has the dove and the raven being sent away, and has 2 of each animal, but also has 14 of each clean animal, right? And the neat thing is, you can take the story of Noah and you can separate it out into 2 different narratives, and guess what? Each one works on their own. And you can construct from this a story that there was in ancient Israel, there were the stories that they told in the north of the kingdom about the ancestors and about God, and then they tended to use Elohim to talk about God. And there's the stories that they told in Judah about the ancestors and God, and they tended to use Yud-Heh Vav-Weh. the tetragrammaton for God, which in German is the J, and that when the Assyrians came down and exiled the northern tribes, these guys went south and they put together a new book called J.E. that told stories. And then, by the way, when the court of King Josiah was around, they decided, or Hezekiah, they decided, hey, let's try to justify the whole rulership. So let's create a narrative story and let's find a missing copy of the Torah in the temple, and we'll call that Deuteronomy. And by the way, the priests, there was a whole different priestly school that said, we don't like the way that the priests are doing things, so we're going to write our own book of the priestly source. And then all these different sources, when we go into Babylon in exile, and we're in exile, someone like Ezra or others is going to take them and say, let's just combine them. And that'll be what our modern Torah looks like. So if you look at the modern Torah, you have this doesn't flip around.
Because I think there's,
There's something on the bottom.
Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah, there's a, there we go. So yeah, pushy thing. I'm just gonna do that. It's easy.
That's easier.
Okay? What was I just saying?
About Ezra.
A modern Torah.
They combined all of the others.
Oh yeah, for example, if you look at the book of, if you look at, say, Genesis 1, Genesis 2. Genesis 1 is the creation of the world. What's the creation of the world? It's gonna be light, and it's gonna be sky and ocean. And it's gonna be land. And then it's gonna be sun, moon, stars. And it's gonna be birds and fish. And then it's gonna be vegetation and animals and humans. And then it's gonna be Shabbat. And in Genesis 2, you're gonna have the creation. And you're gonna have the land and the vegetation already there. And the rivers. And you're going to create man. And man's going to be alone with no helpmeet. So then you're going to create all of the animals and the birds and the fish. And then you're going to create woman from the man. Whereas here, these guys were male and female. Okay. And we're going to create this man from the earth and God's breath. And these two stories aren't exactly compatible, because what's the point of creating man here if we've already created man? And what's to say that the animals, birds, and fish were created after man if they were created not only before man, but hell, a day before for birds and the fish? And in this one, it's always Elohim. And this one, it's Yud He Vav He Elohim. And by the way, this one talks about a garden, which the man is in, and then there's a serpent, and there's the whole problem with the trees. I mean, there's two trees in it. And that doesn't really gel. Except we tell you that this is the priestly story of creation, and this is the J.E. story of creation. It just doesn't bother us.
Does that answer your question?
Not really.
What was the question?
Was it?
Did God
God,
or
right.
inspire directly the Bible?
Okay,
So we
let's
have
go
two
back again.
We have
Hang
two
on.
possibilities there, but there could be a third possibility, which is a combination in a human editor.
Okay, there we go. The Bible starts with 1, the world and our ancestors. 2, Egypt and Exodus. 3, conquest of the land. 4, early political systems, judges. Later political systems. And that there will be a Davidic dynasty. And the Davidic dynasty will culminate in Josiah, who was prophesied 200 years before his birth as being the greatest king who would live forever and do great things, except Josiah at the Battle of Megiddo gets killed by an Egyptian arrow, and as a result, there's a few more kings, and then there's exile. Oops. The Bible, if you look at it, up to the end of Kings, is a political document designed to justify Davidic rulership. And after Kings, well, prophets as well are mostly the same thing. And then you have the return to the land and sort of a statement of this more of a religious enterprise. And one of the great challenges as a rabbi is that the Bible is not a religious book. It's a historical, political book. But we use it as the basis for our religion because God is the main character from which everything, all authority flows. And we know this because the Bible tells us. So we like to say that it's true and that God is the author of it. But really what we say is that Moses wrote his books, except for the last 8 verses where he's dead, which were written by Joshua. Joshua wrote his books, except for his death. Samuel wrote his books, and then the book of Kings are written by, the court history. But we have no proof for any of this, right? From oldest times up until emancipation in Europe, the Jews were their own corporate body. We were our own nation, self-governing, sometimes we'd all get kicked out, but they'll get kicked out as a group, right? And it was organized in a system of God provides authority to the sages, and they, provide structure for the people, and it's a whole legal system. Corporate. And after emancipation, Jews are now citizens, and Judaism becomes a religion. And at that point, we're operating on faith that God did all this, and the faith is God wrote the Bible, God's the author of the whole system, and then there is God. Before this, you didn't need faith because you had no choice. It's just the way it worked. And the great challenge for modern Judaism is to take a system that is based upon, the legal system, where what matters is your actions, and we don't really care what you believe so long as you do it. And how do we adapt that to a system where it's based upon faith and belief? So the Reform response is to say, well, we're just going to buy in the belief system. And the Orthodox response is, well, okay, we'll do that, but we'd really like to hang on to that. And the more Orthodox you get, the more you begin to look like this corporate unit, right? Because Satmar's over in parts of Pennsylvania, and they own the whole town. And the poor conservative movement is trying to be traditional and balancing between the two, and finding it very hard. Hasn't answered your question.
Well, I think it has directly.
Okay. Okay.
You want me to say how I think it answers?
Yeah, sure.
Well, if probably it says that the Bible was inspired by God because of the traditions that they had, and therefore it's God inspired, but it's written by individuals.
Yeah.
And evolves an interpretation.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Right? So,
Makes sense.
one way of looking at things, God has angels, malachim, agents, fingertips. In this world, we call those human beings. Right? And so we do God's will sometimes knowing it, sometimes not knowing it. But it's comforting to believe that there's a power behind everything. It's also perfectly compatible with the reality that there isn't. See, whether you believe in God or don't believe in God, the rain's still gonna fall. The springs are still gonna have water come out of them. And the economy is still going to be doing what it's doing.
The economy is tanked, but.
The economy is doing great, just people don't realize it. People are better off now,
Oh,
but they're just not
absolutely.
realizing it.
Oh, we are.
And
better off.
it's like,
Yeah.
we're just, it's, the current government is doing a terrible job of selling us on our current reality.
Except that people are spending money, which means that they certainly have more,
Yes.
and they may not admit it vocally, but their actions seem to indicate that they're better off.
Yes. However, cars are more expensive because of supply problems, and therefore, the whole thing's terrible. Human beings have never been the brightest things in the world. They are. I saw an optical illusion, and it's sine waves, curves. But if you paint the bottom and the top white and put it on a gray background, and if you paint the sides white and put on a background, one of them looks like zigzags and one of them looks like curves, even though they're both curves. You just see it as zigzags because that's what your brain does, right? Okay, so we talked a little bit about the chutzpah of the rabbis. I guess next week we're talking about Prose Bowl.
A what?
Prose Bowl.
Pros? What?
Prose Bowl.
I'm not getting the word.
PROSBOL. It's in here. It's that third page.
And then I'm stopping, okay? Prose Bowl. Okay. A market economy that grows. I have money. I lend money to the borrower. The borrower does things to increase the money. And at the end of the day, the borrower gives the money back to me, the lender.
Plus interest.
Plus interest. So I get money plus. And that works great. And that builds the system. In fact, if I've got $100 and I put it into the bank's gonna keep 10 and lend out 90. That 90 is gonna be deposited into the bank, and they're gonna keep 10, and then they're gonna lend out 80, and so on. So at the end of the day, the amount of money actually out there, if everyone looks at their bank accounts, is 100 plus 90 plus 80. There's a lot more money than the physical $100 bills, which is why as everyone tries to pull their money out at the same time, it's a rush on the bank because there isn't enough, right? But money expands. Now this system works great, right? That's how investment works, right? Problem is, we have this thing called Shemitah. Shemitah. Every 7 years, all debts are canceled. And you get nothing back.
Would you submit that to my bank, please?
Okay? You get nothing back, which means in years 1, 2, and 3, you might lend. In years 4, 5, and 6, you're thinking, there's no way in heaven I'm lending you money because it's just gonna be gone. The Bible says, don't be stingy. However, the system of Shemitah and lends is not about loans for investment. They're about loans for avoiding poverty. Meaning, why am I borrowing money? I'm borrowing money to buy meat. And I'm gonna eat the meat and it's not gonna grow, right? At the end of the day, maybe I'll be able to pay back, and if not, please understand every loan you ever give out to your family and friends is a gift. You're never getting it back. And the rabbis realized there's a problem here, because people need to have, look, if I borrow $100,000 to buy a house, oh, I get a free house. No one's gonna lend anyone anything. So they create Prosbul. And Prosbul is a document where instead of the lender giving money to the borrower, the lender gives the money to the court. And the court gives the money to the borrower. And in the Shemitah year, this loan is gotten rid of, but this loan isn't. And that's the Prosbul. It's a way of defeating a biblical system that is anti-economic.
My understanding
And this is not, and how the hell did the rabbis figure that one out? To undo clearly says loans are canceled. Yep.
My understanding is this system never really existed. That debts were not paid, land wasn't returned to the original owners. It was a system that could never work.
Whether land ever returned, I don't know. But debts being canceled, that may have happened. Enough for the rabbis to be upset about it to create the Prosbul.
And weren't slaves also people who were working indentured? Weren't they released?
That's 50 years.
So
It's 50.
the Shemitah system is about loans. The slave system is different, and the slave system is not tied to the same 7-year cycle. The slave cycle is an individual 6-year system where you're a slave for 6 years, and the 7th year you go free, starting whenever you sold yourself. But every 50 years, all the slaves go free. I've given you Torah. Okay. Any other questions?
To me, it's always been a guide for how we, that's why I go with this, it's a living document, because it does change, or our interpretation of it changes. And
Yeah, so the Bible is not Jewish religion. If it was, we'd have an altar there, we'd have blood and animals, and we'd have sacrifice, and great. All, be knee deep in meat.
it also helps us think about our actions.
Yeah.
And pause when we're going to do something. And we may not say, wait, hold a minute, I've got to go look this up.
The rabbis did a great job of taking this very interesting system and using it as a justification for a completely different system. Okay. Milk and meat is not in the Bible. Damages for embarrassment and injury and healing, that's not. The Bible says someone plucks out your eye, pluck out their eye. That's it. Nice and simple. The rabbi said, no, it's monetary value. The rabbis did a great job, but they are really hijacking the system and redirecting it to a different direction. And we can choose to see it or not.
It's all what people will accept.
It's what people will accept. Correct. And there's a social contract, what people agree to, and there's different versions of it, right? In this country here, the reason why I have to pay my taxes is because in some mythical place, I agreed that the government should have this authority, right? social contract. We all agree that we're going to be bound by this. I have to follow the laws of the United States because we, the people, created a government. And had I been there, I would have been one of those people. Right? That's why. That's the authority. Why does the government get to incarcerate someone or kill someone? Because the people have granted them the authority. And the people have the ability to take back that authority through revolution. And they've done it at least once. That's where the United States came from.
But sometimes it's taken back by legislation. Some states have capital punishment, others do not.
Yes, but the legislation is legislated by the government. And the government gets its authority from the people. So it all flows back to the people. Whereas in Canada, the reason I pay my taxes is because God granted the power of justice to His Majesty King Charles III. King Charles III, as the fount of justice, gave the administration of justice to Parliament. Parliament used that power in the past to create the Canadian Parliament. The Canadian Parliament used that power to create legislation, including Revenue Canada, and although they changed their name, and Revenue Canada. But the reason why I have to pay my taxes is because God said so. Because God is the ultimate authority in Canada. In the United States, the people are the ultimate authority. Which just goes to say, you Americans, you think you're God.
No, we know we're God.
Does Canada still recognize the authority of the King of England?
Sure.
No, but some don't, like New Zealand or Australia.
Yeah, but Canada's not New Zealand.
Oh, I know.
But
They
Canada,
could be, you could revoke the authority of the king.
we could become a republic.
Right.
However, it is so convenient. We don't have to pay to maintain King Charles and his court. We get it for free, or nearly for free. Like, we don't have to pay for the palaces and the uniforms and all that other stuff. And he never comes to visit, so it's fine. And, so like your president, he goes around and there's police and there's guards and there's army. The Governor General of Canada, the head of state, right? I don't know who it is anymore. All I do know is the security around them isn't terribly great. Because if they get killed, they're just a figurehead, it doesn't matter. It's
What about the prime
inexpensive.
minister?
So that's different from Trudeau? There's a governor general?
We're gonna learn that.
Here's another explanation.
I just, we didn't learn about.
Canada doesn't have a House of Lords.
They have a Senate. Okay. You have a head of state. You have a head of government. The executive. And you have a head of government, legislative. Okay. Executive branch, legislative branch, and the head of state. The head of state in Canada is the king, and the representative local by the Governor General. The United States, your head of state is the president. The job of the head of state is to give assent to legislation and to represent the country to other countries and to do ceremonial stuff, pomp and circumstance. The head of the executive is, keep the government flowing and going in a direction. In Canada, that's the Prime Minister. Of the House of Commons. In the United States, the head of government, the executive branch, is the president.
Who is the Governor General now in Canada?
I don't know.
Doesn't make any difference.
I mean, they
It's
come
just
and
a
go.
figurehead, right?
It's just, yeah, they're just,
They're not elected, right?
they're appointed. They have no power. They have as much power as the king. Okay?
So does he report to the king? Does he report to the?
I guess. I don't know.
Looking it up. Won't mean anything to us.
And the Prime Minister.
Okay. The current Governor General of Canada is Mary Simon.
Oh,
Do we know it?
yeah, Mary, that's Mary.
What?
Mary?
Okay, look. In Israel, can I put an Israel one here? In Israel, the head of state is the president. Who's the president of Israel right now? No,
No.
Herzog. What can he do? Nothing. The only thing the president of Israel and the governor general of Canada says, if you don't have enough to have a majority in parliament, I get to pick who gets first shot. Okay? Appointed, okay. Now, the head of government in the legislative branch in Canada is also the prime minister. And in the United States, it's the House, it's the speaker of the House. We don't care about the Senate. I mean, who sets the agenda? Schumer or what's his name?
Well, for
Johnson.
economic things, it has to come, originate in the House.
Yeah, so, okay, I mean, we don't care who the, so, the Speaker of the House. So that's the difference. So, the neat thing is that your president combines ceremonial and practical, whereas our Governor General is just purely ceremonial, so it's a lot less expensive to schlep them around.
But there are two different types of government. One, your Canadian government is a parliamentarian type of government.
So is
We
yours.
do not have.
Yes, you do.
No, we do not elect our prime minister. We don't have a prime minister. We have a president elected by all the people.
Yeah, but here's a parliamentary system. Okay?
Theoretically.
Yeah, but hang on. Here's a parliamentary system, okay? Legislation starts in the House, goes to the Senate, and is signed off by the president, right?
Yeah.
In Canada, legislation starts out in the House of Commons, goes to the Senate, and is signed off by the Governor General.
Who approves your judges?
In the United States, judges are nominated by the
President.
head of government and approved by the Senate. In Canada, judges, at least Supreme Court judges, are selected by the Prime Minister, and that's it. They just select. But that has nothing to do with parliamentary practice, it has to do with how you select judges. I mean, you guys also elect people, which is nuts. Pardon me. Okay. But no, this is a parliamentary system, because you have a parliament. That's what a parliament is. Now, the only difference is that in Canada, the prime minister is the equivalent to the House leader. So what we're doing is we're taking the head of the legislative and we're giving them the executive power as well, whereas you're taking the head of state and giving them executive as well. So your executive is drawn from everyone except for the House, except for Parliament. To be in the executive, right, cabinet, you can't be in Parliament. Whereas in Canada, to be in the executive, you must be from Parliament. Oddly enough, and then I'm leaving the room, okay? Oddly enough, in Canada, where they only have like 300 people to choose from, they are able to get a cabinet of 30 people, of 15 men and 15 women, and Muslims, Jews, Christians, Sikhs, Native American, Japanese, Chinese, every possibility in their executive of 30 people, of all the ministers, right? Whereas in the United States, you have 300, what's the population now? What's the population of the United States?
330 million.
Meanwhile, you have 330 million people, and there's a group of 535 that you're not allowed to choose from. So there's 535 people you cannot choose. However, from the 330 million people in your cabinet of about 30 people, you have mainly old, white men. It's a decision.
It's changing.
No, it's a decision, right? Like, are you telling me that out of 300 people, the prime minister can find competent people in a spectrum and gender balance, and whereas out of 330 million, you can't find more than 5 women competent to lead government? What kind of country is this?
I think though that the parliamentarian has a disadvantage. If you look at unstable governments, unstable governments that change quickly, like Italy, Israel, all of those are parliamentarian governments which you can vote in a no confidence vote, plus you have multiple parties. There's, people talk about the problem of only having 2 major parties, but there's a problem of having 30 parties too.
Okay, bonus round. And the word that you used that stuck in my craw was it effective? Or what was exactly what you said? About, the multiple thing, like
Multiple parties.
no, before that, it's like having the government falling. What was that?
Oh, no, votes of no confidence.
Right, before that?
That many of the governments that,
Are unstable. That's it, there we go.
well, maybe unstable is the
Unstable,
wrong
okay.
word.
Okay, here we go.
We're
So,
variable.
now hang on. Okay, so you've got Canada, and you've got a minority government, and they're unable to pass the budget, so you have new elections or reconfiguration until you have a situation where you can pass the budget. You guys have an election, you've got a Democratic speaker, you've got a Republican House, and a Democratic Senate, and you're incapable of passing the budget. And the solution for this is to wait and court disaster and default. Because your government is, it's not unstable, it's incapable.
I didn't say all parliamentarian governments are unstable. I said, if you look at the unstable ones.
But that's not a measure of instability, it's a measure of the population. Because in those countries where they have 5 different parties, it's because the people divide themselves in 5 different groups. Whereas in this country, the majority of the people live here and here, and the majority of the Senate comes from here. So that, again, to quote Mitch McConnell said, you know, I want to hold off on, you know, the next Supreme Court justice because I want to let the people decide. Well, guess what? The people decided, right? But the thing is, more of them, by numbers, went for the other guy. But they still said, well, this represents the will of the people, right? Even though you lost the election by, what, 6 million votes? I feel comfortable saying that you won the will of the people, not the majority of the people, just the people that we care about. Okay?
Yeah.
So, with the greatest of cautious respect, no, I have tons of respect, but with a bit of caution, I want to say, don't poo-poo the parliamentary system. Because here's the other thing that you need to know. And it's not just that the number of countries that don't use the metric system is 2.
Yeah, but they're the 2 good ones.
What's the other country that uses the metric system? What's the other system that doesn't use, country that doesn't use the metric system?
I don't think UK completely.
It's not the UK. UK uses mostly metric. No, the 2 countries that do not use metric at all.
US.
US.
Uganda?
No. Mexico.
Here we go.
Who's the leader?
The US, that paragon of stability, Liberia, although Liberia, I think, has recently switched to metric, and that paragon, the greatest country in the world, Myanmar, which currently has a military dictatorship.
Well, you know.
Which brings me to my next point, just while we're riffing. Every single country in the world that has used a US-style constitution as opposed to a parliamentary system with a separation of powers, every single one of them except for one has devolved into a military coup. The one exception is the USA. The USA has never had a military coup. Every other country that's used the US model of the Constitution has had a military coup. Would you like to know why? Because most countries cannot tolerate days, months, or years of gridlock where nothing can get done.
You know, you're looking at a more recent, no, you're looking at a more recent US. It used to be at a time that people in Congress would compromise. This is more unusual, actually, than historically.
True.
People did compromise.
True, but remember, we're talking about system design. And the fact that they're able to do what they can do now within the design of the system says that good behavior prevented the system from collapsing. In other systems, they don't allow bad behavior to collapse the system. They have guardrails.
You could say that the system collapsed at some point and there was a military coup. It was called the Civil War. And
Wow. No, that wasn't a military coup because the government was still in charge.
well, yeah, but
In any event, I don't mean to get my dukes up. All I'm saying is that I know that we've all been taught to say the United States of America is the greatest country in the world.
We're exceptional.
You are exceptional. You are definitely exceptional, but not necessarily in the most best way. Okay? So there's this beautiful scene. I encourage you to. There was a show called The News. What was it called? The Newsroom.
Something like that.
Yeah. It was really.
It ran for 3 seasons. It had the guy from Dumb and Dumber.
Jim Carrey?
No, the other one.
I don't know.
He's now very respectable. He plays respectable people now. Like the head of NASA in The Martians. Anyways, in the newsroom, the first episode, someone asks, please state for us why America is the greatest country in the world. And he says, well, and he starts listing off where America is on education, quality of life, poverty, incarceration. I think America has a great legislative system. On the other hand, it's a legislative system where, okay, I love democracy too, okay? I love democracy. But in Canada, they just don't let the mob decide who the candidates will be. The parties pick the candidates for you, and then you get to choose from the menu. Okay? Here, primaries?
Well, that's the party picking the candidate.
Well, the
No. That's the,
where's the Democratic primary right now? There is one. There isn't one for.
okay, right, exactly, sure. Well, I mean, there could be. But like for the Republicans, here's the thing. I can register as a Republican and vote in the Republican primary.
That's a
no,
flaw.
yeah.
But you
Isn't
can't,
that a flaw?
but you
No.
can't, yeah, you can't vote in the Democratic.
True, but look,
Yeah, but you can.
look, you want to
The
save,
general election, you can't.
you want to save, you want, okay. Here's a great hack, okay? I mean, if you want to avoid the election of Donald Trump, assuming that's one of your goals, here's an easy hack. If every single Democrat changes their registration to Republican and votes in the Republican primaries, you'll get a different result.
There are those who
It's been
say-
tried before, it doesn't
Depends
work.
on
What do you mean it doesn't work? Trust me, if every single
Oh, no,
Democrat,
you
if
can't get
every
everything.
single Democrat and every single independent registered as a Republican and voted in the primaries, it had a very different result.
some-
Well, if that result was DeSantis, I don't know if that's so much better.
There are.
No, it wouldn't be that, no.
There are those who say that when Trump was nominated, it was because there were a lot of people who really wanted Hillary to get the nomination and be running against someone who could not possibly win. So they switched to, and they actually went
Well,
for him.
that's,
And that's,
yeah, but that's the problem when you play games.
yeah. I know.
And this is a system where you're allowed to play games. It's amazing. I love it. It's fantastic. Do you know what the wildest thing is in the Canadian Parliament? Here's the wildest thing. This is unbelievable. You'll never believe this. Any amendment that isn't germane to the bill under discussion is not allowed. All amendments have to be on topic.
And who decides that?
The speaker,
So they can't.
and the speaker is nonpartisan.
So they can't put a poison pill into the bill
No,
and dump the bill out there. Wow, that's
no,
great.
no. And every piece of legislation has to have only one topic.
But nothing would get.
They are so backwards that way. I mean, really. I mean, what were they thinking?
Do they actually have to read the legislation before they pass it?
Legislation, so the first reading is to have the legislation, put out there. And then it goes to committee, and in committee, every single clause of the legislation must be debated and passed, yes, no. And then it goes to a second reading for the whole parliament to debate it. And then if it passes that, then they have a formal third reading, and then it's signed into law. So it takes a little longer to get things done. But then again, the legislation's not long, because the criminal code is a long thing. But you do little acts that, they actually have to read the thing because they're legislators. And
Wow.
they will often, people in the Senate who are appointed used to be for life, but now they're like for up until age 75. They have expertise. So then they will actually, when it's in the legislature, they'll float it by the Senate colleagues to say, hey, what do you think of this? And they'll say, oh, well, you could do this and this and that. And then it goes to the Senate and the same process happens. And then it becomes law. So nothing like handwritten, no handwritten notes.
Sounds great.
Did you say the Senate is appointed?
Yes,
It's like your house of
Who appoints them?
the government of the day.
And they're for life?
They used to be.
75.
They used to be.
Now they're 75?
Up to age 75. So that's kind of increasing things. But the Senate is not as active as the American Senate is, because they know that they're on thin ice. So the Senate is kind of a place of sober second thought and regional influence. So there's 100 senators, there's 24 for Ontario, 20 for Quebec, I think like 20's odd for the West and so many for the East. It gets divided out. It used to be that I think the senators now, they try to make sure that there's one from every province and that sort of thing. The prime minister gets to appoint them. But the legislatures are very involved in suggesting people, and it works pretty well. Usually people in the Senate are the elder statesmen from the provincial areas that have been put out to, not pasture, but to have some good deeds in a second life.
So
Do
can
they
any
invest it?
legislation originate in the Senate?
It could, but then it has to go through the House.
Okay. Well, same in the US.
So, the cabinet is drawn from the House and the Senate. Usually they have one or two senators in the cabinet so that legislation can be introduced there. It's rare, but it could happen, sure. But most of the activity is in the House. And the thing is that by having the executive drawn from the parliamentary majority, you get things done. Okay, you get things done. For 4 or 5 years, you get things done. Oh, that's the other thing. Irregular elections, right? You know who the candidates are for parliament right now? There are none. Nobody knows who's running. Do you know why? Because there's no election. And the people who are incumbent, they're not running for re-election. Why? Because there's no election.
Some other governments actually think that this is a government in power.
This is a government power.
They don't have a countdown clock.
There is no countdown
Yeah.
clock. There is, at some point in the next 5 years, you must call an election. When you call an election, you can decide how long the election period will be. The longest time ever, I think it was like 100 days, and people were dying. This is too long an election. Like, so for that 100 days, or 90 days, or 80 days, or 60 days, that's the election. Everyone gets equal time on the broadcasters for free. It's all local ridings, there's no national thingies. And the ballots are counted by hand because you're only voting for one thing. So like, you know, they're not hard to do. It's not like the ballots here, you have 27 things. You know, you're only voting, you know, one, you know, just put the X on the one thing. And then the people take office the next day.
So you can go ahead in your third year in government and say, look, the people, we really did something great for the people, let's call elections.
Absolutely.
We'll win.
You can call a snap election and try to shore up your majority. And people will tolerate that, and sometimes they don't. So right now in Great Britain, it's clear, if they were to call an election now, the Tories would lose. That's why they are not calling an election. Meanwhile, Trudeau recently called an election because he thought, hey, I can game the system, and it didn't help him too much, and people are like pissed off. Yeah, absolutely.
This is very prominent in Israel.
Well, yeah. Well, in Israel, the problem is you can't actually form a government, but Israel has a different problem. See, Israel's not a parliamentary system based upon, it's not a parliamentary system, it's a list system. So for example, okay. This is Canada. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 ridings. In the election, people run in ridings. You must live within the riding that you're running in, okay? As you represent them. At the end of the election, whoever from the people who won, so these are the ones that are liberals, and these are the ones that were won by the Tories, and this one was won by the NDP. So these three get together and decide, hey, who's in charge? Everyone says, you are. Great, you are now the opposition leader. And these four get together and say, hey, amongst the four of us, who's in charge? You are. Okay, you get to be the prime minister. And you can pick your candidate from all those people. But what really happens is the leader of the party gets chosen outside. And what happens is, let's say, the leader of the party was running here, but they didn't win their own riding. These guys did. Oh, so you know what they're gonna do now? This guy here is gonna say, okay, I'm gonna resign and allow the leader to run in my riding in a by-election so he'll be in the government. It's cute.
That's a separate election.
Yeah, a by-election, yeah, like a special election.
But it has to be pretty quick, because you want.
But
Number
yeah, like a
seven
month
to
or
be
two
the
later,
prime
whatever,
minister.
yeah. Sometimes, you know, they have things where the leader is leading from the balcony of the press gallery, anyways, it doesn't always happen. Or if a new leader is elected to the National Party, and they're not elected, someone's gonna resign so that they can run. So Joe Clark starts out as like representing somewhere in the Northwest Territories, and then the next election he was representing Ontario, where he's from. Okay, that's nice.
Is that because you moved?
No, it's
No, you
because,
said you
it's
had
because-
lived in the district
well, you-
where you're running.
so he moved there. I don't know. Anyways, they didn't worry about that too much. Anyways, so the thing is that when this government is formed, every single area of the land has a voice. Same as here. This is Israel. Party A submits a list of people that it wants. Party B submits a list of people that it wants. Party C submits a list of people that it wants. The people vote for these thingies, and those thingies, and these thingies. If, let me make the 10th one to make it easier here. If the vote is 50% this guy, and 30% this guy, and 20% this one, that means that this one gets the first 5 people on their list, and this one gets the first 3, and this one gets the first 2. And all the other people on the list do not get elected. Now, I happen to live in this corner of Israel, and my guy that I want to vote for is number 7 on the list. I'm going to vote, he's never going to get elected. Okay? So the problem is that all the guys at the top of the list represent like Jerusalem and those parts, and nobody who lives in the Golan is getting elected, right? Which means that all the people who are elected in Israel have no responsibility to any particular location in the country. They only have a responsibility to their people who support them. Which means that if you happen to live over here, nobody cares. The reason this works here is that these people are spread out, right? But you might have like this area here is kind of circle people, and this area here is diamond people, and this area here is squiggly people. So it'll get this one and maybe this one, and this might get those two, and that might, so you know, right? But people don't live in nice areas. So for example, in the Canadian election in I think it was 1982, okay? 1982, God, that was a long time ago. Kim Campbell has been elected the new Tory leader to succeed John Mulroney. She's going into the election with a majority. At the result of the election, she wins, I think the Tories win 10% of the vote. Also, the Bloc Québécois wins 10% of the vote. How does this translate? In Parliament, this 10% of the vote translates into 2 seats. And this 10% of the vote translates into, I think, 50 seats, and they're the leader of the opposition. Why did 10% here represent 2 seats, and 10% here represent 50 seats? Because in Canada, the 10% of the Tories were 10% across the board, whereas the Bloc Québécois were only in Quebec. And so their 10% here was all of that area. Ten 10% of the nation this way, you get all the votes. 10% of the nation that way, you get none of the votes, right? Isn't this fun? It's like political theory. Right. So the thing is that Israel is a terrible system because it doesn't correct for where people are living. And so look, if you are the casino party and you believe in casinos, and I was there when the casino party ran, and you get enough votes across the country, you get the casino guy elected. And guess who he represents?
Casinos.
Yeah. The problem is that Israel is supposed to come up with a constitution. The problem with Israel coming up with a constitution is a constitution is an agreement of people to limit their own powers. And no Israeli government is ever going to agree to anything that's going to limit their powers. That's why they have no constitution. The United States created their constitution before they were political parties. So nobody's limiting their powers because nobody has powers. They're not parties when they have the constitution.
Time for lunch.
Yeah, I think so.
Are we good?
If we have lunch,
Sure, of
we'll have
course.
lunch.
Oh my God.
Cookies?
No, there's cheese and stuff in the fridge.
Oh, that's breakfast.